Hey guys, Mr. Happy here, and welcome to my guide for Amdapor Township, the new 4-man dungeon in patch 2.2 for Final Fantasy XIV A Realm Reborn. This dungeon has an item level requirement of 55, drops item level 70 gear, and can be accessed after doing the quest One Night in Amdapor, which is given by E. Sumi Yan in the Conjurer's Guild in Gridania. Full completion of this dungeon without a duty roulette bonus will also net you 50 mythology tomes and 45 soldiery tomestones. Since we will be discussing the whole dungeon, I will briefly discuss trash in between each boss, making note of things that you should watch out for specifically. The dungeon starts off with some basic enemies. Mushroom enemies do basic AoEs players need to move out of, Wamuras have a conal attack called Poison Dust which grants a stacking poison debuff, and Ruin Draws do standard slug AoE attacks that should be moved out of. One unique enemy you'll encounter is the Gremlin, which can place a debuff on the tank, increasing their damage taken. It's recommended for lesser geared tanks to pop a cooldown when you receive this, as it cannot be removed by the healers. Remember that gremlins wander around, and if you pull enemies cautiously, you can fight them without any additional hassle. Now, shortly into the dungeon, you will encounter a mold colony blocking your path. This colony will spawn several hecdies and tainted molds when you approach it. If you are in melee range of the tainted mold, it will explode and poison anyone nearby, but they pop with a single hit from far away. Hecdies don't seem to do anything special, but if you do not kill the mold colony quickly, you can be overwhelmed by them. So it is recommended to make the colony your target, then deal with the Hecdies. You also run into a few Dynamite enemies. They are no different from the ones that have been in previous dungeon encounters. And one of the most hilarious enemies that you'll run into is Mimics. Mimics most often spawn when there are two coffers next to each other by a gateway. Let the tank open them and avoid their only special attack, a small AoE called Death Trap, which does high AoE damage. The first boss is Decaying Gourmand, a Gubu boss that has a lot of negative status effects. When you start the fight, his first important attack will be Prey. Gourmand will mark a target and declare them his prey. He will then spit an attack called Moldy Phlegm on a random party member. If hit by the initial strike of Moldy Phlegm, you will gain a debuff that reduces all healing you receive. It will also leave a circle patch that deals damage over time if you stand in it. That debuff can be Asuned, in case you're wondering. After this, the marked target will be swallowed and become unable to act, as well as take damage over time. In order to free them, you must attack the voracious maw in the boss's belly. Destroying it will free the captive. For higher geared groups, it may not matter who gets swallowed, but for lower level groups, it's worth noting that if you are marked as prey, you can pass the debuff to a nearby party member to have them swallowed instead. This can be especially useful if your healer is marked and you pass it off to a DPS. For this reason, stay loosely spread out so you aren't too close, so it won't be that difficult to make the switch. The boss will also use Spore Cloud when he swallows somebody, which inflicts a party-wide stacking poison debuff. It does mediocre damage at one stack, but it adds up quickly. Thankfully, it can be Asuned. Once under 25%, we notice he started using Beatdown, which deals heavy damage to the tank and knocks him back, but he stopped using all of his other attacks. We aren't sure if this is intended or not, so just keep an eye out for the mechanics mentioned in the previous phases. Progressing after the first boss, you will run into some more mold colonies and some trash. Some new trash include the Wamura Kampa, whose only special attack is a small AoE fireball around his target, and Gadflies, who have a conal poison attack and an AoE sphere they will shoot out without warning at a random party member. Also, expect poison flooded trails to deal about 500 damage every 3 seconds to those who stand in them. Other than that, just clear through the trash like you did before and you're on to the second boss. The second boss is Ariok, who won't fight you directly at the start of the fight. Instead, Ranch Wamuras will litter the field, spawning constantly. They will use an attack called Poison Dust, which the Wamuras did earlier in the dungeon. When one is destroyed next to a player, it will explode and place a debuff on them called Scale Flakes. This debuff causes the boss to attack whoever has the most stacks of it currently, as well as take increased damage. These stacks will have to be maintained for the duration of the fight, as Ariok will ignore all other enmity. It is best to let the tank get the first 2 stacks, then have the other DPS each get 1 each, so you go tank, tank, DPS, DPS, and then you feed the third one to a tank and you keep alternating. Basically, you'll want to keep going in the order of tank, tank, DPS, other DPS, tank, DPS, other DPS, tank, until you're able to finish the boss. To ensure the tank doesn't get too many stacks, lower gear tanks will have to notice that they need to use cooldowns as they get to their higher stacks. Other than that, he does a strong frontal attack on his target called Stormwind, which deals low to moderate damage. He can shoot a laser beam in a straight line, which is easily dodgeable. He does some negligible, unavoidable AoE damage that I suspect has another purpose I'll be adding in the annotations later. And he can also summon poison trails under him that expand rapidly. None of it was too bothersome, so just dodge and kill. Moving forward, you will encounter your last 2 trash packs of the dungeon. The first one is made up of a single Alator and 2 dastardly Devilets. The Alator will just attack his target, but the Devilets will occasionally cast Dark Blizzard, which is basically a high damage version of Freeze. You'll also notice a Balzephon. These Balzephons are linked to the nearby White Mage Stones, which grant him a stacking regen. Pull and kill the Alatar and Devilets before killing the White Mage Stones and then the Balzephon. Note that the Balzephon will occasionally teleport to an ally and do a large AoE attack around them that inflicts gravity. The second group has more White Mage Stones and 4 Ahriman. Kill the Ahriman first, then the Mage Stones, then the Balzephon. Please note you can pull the Ahriman without pulling the Balzephon. I'm just an idiot in this video. After you are done, you are at the final boss, Diabolos, or Diablos if you don't like the extra O. Diabolos is a mostly straightforward fight, with one neat gimmick. Before worrying about any mechanics, pay very close attention to the diabolical gates that spawn along the outside of the field when you engage him. Be sure to memorize where each one is, specifically where the pairs are. Each symbol should appear above 2 separate doors, which signifies them being linked. You will get more opportunities to look at the linked doors later in the fight. Starting the fight, Diabolos has a few basic attacks. His auto attacks, Cleave, and he also has an attack called Graviball, which will likely be the first move that you see. He will mark a target with a crosshair and fire a Graviball at them. This Graviball will then appear at the player's location, wait a few seconds, and then explode. If you are in range, it will do a lot of damage and it will terrorize you. Additionally, they will remain there for the rest of the fight, so you want to place them along the edges. Another move he has is Ultimate Terror, which will hit for about 1,000 damage. It didn't really seem to do anything else, and it can easily be dodged by just moving under Diabolos when he casts. Next is Nightmare. This attack simply deals about 1,000 damage and sleeps the whole party for about 5 seconds. It's nothing major, but lower geared groups may want to stun this to ensure that the tank can survive the 5 seconds without healing. If you don't stun this, you'll probably want to stun Ultimate Terror instead. Every 25% of his HP, Diabolos will use Nocto's Shield, rendering him immune to stuns. He will then move to the center and begin casting Ruinous Omen, which has an immensely long cast time. When he starts casting this, you need to open 2 matching diabolical gates, which will then suck you in and send you into the void while you travel between the 2 gates. You want to be in the void during the Ruinous Omen cast, so you may want to wait a couple of seconds before opening them when you see the cast. While you're in the void, when he does Ruinous Omen, it just doesn't do anything to you. Doesn't hit you for damage, doesn't give you a debuff, nothing. However, when you come out of the Diabolical Gate, you will get a stacking debuff for 2 minutes that increases all damage taken. If you do not use the gate and decide to just eat Ruinous Omen to the face, Diabolos will hit you with it, likely killing you. If it doesn't kill you, it does give you 4 of that stacking debuff. His only other attack was Night Terror, which we only saw him use once. It seemed to be a concentrated version of Ultimate Terror, likely hitting much harder. Just move out of the way. If you could do all of that, congratulations, you won. Amdapor Township is a pretty short dungeon, so expect to be here grinding out those soldiery tomes or even mythology tomes in the future. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, favorite, subscribe, and share for more Final Fantasy XIV videos, especially guides with the new patch 2.2. Also, be sure to follow me on Facebook and Twitter where you can pick my brain and get regular updates about when I'm posting videos. And of course, be sure to follow me on Twitch where, after a little bit of the hype has died down, I will be streaming Final Fantasy XIV patch 2.2 as much of the content as I can. But anyway guys, thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.